When billionaire Jonathan Foster came home early that evening in Texas, he expected to find silence, the same painful silence that had filled his mansion since his wife died. But what he found instead made his heart stop. Through his daughter's half-open door, he saw his black maid, Anita, holding Jennifer's small hands and spinning her gently around the room. Jennifer, his little girl who hadn't spoken or smiled in 9 long months, was laughing, her voice breaking the air that had been quiet for too long. For a moment, Jonathan couldn't breathe. He didn't know if he was dreaming or losing his mind. But when Jennifer saw him standing there, her laughter vanished, and fear filled her eyes. The house went still again, and Jonathan's world began to shake. Jonathan's hand tightened on the doorknob, his briefcase still hanging loosely in his other hand. He blinked, hoping he had imagined what he just saw. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. He wanted to speak, to ask what was happening, but no sound came out. The scene before him felt unreal. Jennifer stood frozen beside Anita, her little chest rising and falling fast. Her bright eyes that had just been full of life were now empty again, the joy wiped away by fear. She looked so fragile that Jonathan's throat ached. He had waited for months to hear her speak, to hear any sound from her mouth. But now that it had finally happened, he didn't know how to react. Anita's voice broke the silence. "Mr. Foster," she said softly, her words shaking, "I didn't know you'd be home early. Please, I can explain." Jonathan didn't answer. He stepped inside slowly, his eyes darting between Anita and his daughter. The room smelled faintly of baby powder and jasmine. The little speaker on the table was still playing a soft tune, one he recognized. It was the same lullaby his late wife, Claire, used to sing every night before bed. He swallowed hard and whispered, "Jennifer, what were you doing?" Jennifer didn't speak. She looked down at her small feet, her fingers twisting together nervously. Anita bent down and touched Jennifer's shoulder gently. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said, her voice calm and warm. "You didn't do anything wrong." Those words made Jonathan's eyes sting. For months, he had said almost the same thing to his daughter, but his voice had never reached her. Somehow, this woman, this maid he barely knew, had done what all the doctors, the therapists, and the expensive treatments could not. But part of him was afraid. He didn't understand what he was seeing. He didn't know what Anita had done, or why Jennifer looked guilty now. The air grew heavier. Jennifer took a step back, tears filling her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, so low that Jonathan almost missed it. His eyes widened. That one word sounded like a miracle. But it was followed by silence again, her lips pressing together as if she regretted speaking. Jonathan moved closer and knelt to her level. "Jennifer," he said, voice breaking. "Was that you? Did you just talk to me?" She didn't reply. She just looked at him with the same scared look she had the day they buried her mother. Anita reached for the speaker and quickly turned off the music. "Please don't be upset," she said quietly. "I was only trying to help her feel safe again." Jonathan stood up slowly. "How did you get her to speak? What did you do?" Anita hesitated. "I didn't force her, sir. I just listened. She didn't want to talk, so I stopped asking her to. I just sat here with her. I let her know she wasn't alone." Jonathan rubbed his forehead. He was confused, grateful, and suspicious all at once. His emotions were tangled like knots. For the first time in months, hope had entered his house, but it had come in a way he couldn't understand. He turned to Jennifer again, but she had already climbed onto her bed and curled up under the blanket, hiding her face. Anita looked at Jonathan helplessly. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line," Anita said softly. "I didn't mean to. I only wanted her to feel safe again." Jonathan didn't answer. His throat was tight. He looked around the room, the soft pink curtains, the stuffed toys that had gathered dust, the drawings on the wall that stopped the day Claire died. Everything in this room was frozen in time, just like Jennifer's heart. He wanted to thank Anita for what she had done, but his pride and confusion held him back. He was a man who built empires, who controlled everything around him. Yet here, in his own house, he had been powerless. And this young maid, who had been working for him only 3 days, had found a way to reach his daughter's soul. He walked out of the room slowly, his steps heavy. Anita watched him leave, her heart pounding, unsure if she had just saved her job or lost it. Downstairs, Jonathan went into his study and closed the door quietly behind him. He leaned against it, trying to breathe. His hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a glass of water. Every sound in his head replayed Jennifer's laughter, her tiny voice saying, "Daddy," the music, Anita's calm words. For months, the mansion had been nothing but a graveyard of memories. He used to sit at that same desk and listen to the silence until it made him feel sick. But tonight, that silence had been broken, and it terrified him. Outside the study, Anita stood in the hallway, staring at the floor. She didn't know if she should stay or pack her things. Her eyes were wet, and her heart was beating fast. She had seen the shock in Jonathan's eyes, the way he looked at her like she had crossed some invisible line. She didn't blame him. She knew how it must have looked, a maid spinning his daughter around, music playing, laughter echoing through the halls of a house built on pain. But Anita had only wanted to help. She knew what silence did to a child. She had lived it. Upstairs, Jennifer lay still under her blanket, her small hands clutching her mother's picture frame. Her lips moved quietly as if whispering something to herself. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel empty. That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, his mind restless. He remembered the day Claire died, the phone call, the hospital room, the way Jennifer refused to speak afterward. Every memory cut through him like glass. He thought about Anita, the soft way she spoke, the calmness in her eyes, and the laughter he had heard from Jennifer's room. Something in him wanted to believe this was good, that maybe this woman had brought a light he didn't know his home needed. But another part of him was afraid of losing control, afraid of trusting a stranger. As the night grew deeper, he walked to Jennifer's door once more. The room was quiet again. He stood there for a long time, his hand resting on the doorknob, his heart torn between fear and hope. Something told him that whatever had started tonight was only the beginning, and that tomorrow everything he believed about trust, pain, and love would be tested. He whispered into the silence, "Please, Claire, if you can hear me, help me do the right thing." The only reply was the soft sound of Jennifer's music box still turning slowly on her bedside table. The next morning came quietly over the wide Texas sky. The sun rose behind the tall oak trees that surrounded the Foster mansion, painting the walls of the house in warm gold. But inside, the air was still heavy. Jonathan sat at the edge of the dining table, staring at the untouched plate of eggs in front of him. He hadn't slept all night. His mind kept replaying what he saw in Jennifer's room, the dancing, the laughter, his daughter's voice. He didn't know what to feel. Relief, shock, fear, maybe all three. For 9 long months, that house had been silent, filled with nothing but sadness. Then one night, in the hands of a woman he barely knew, everything changed. He wanted to believe it was good, but another part of him feared something he couldn't name. Mrs. Green, the elderly housekeeper, stood at the counter wiping a dish towel. She glanced at Jonathan, then looked away quickly. She had seen the way he came down last night, pale and shaken, and she knew something had happened upstairs. "Would you like me to call Anita down for breakfast, sir?" she asked carefully. Jonathan looked up slowly. "No, let her rest. I'll speak to her later." But Mrs. Green didn't move. She hesitated, her lips pressed together like she was holding something back. "If I may say, sir," she said softly, "I still don't trust that woman. You don't know where she came from. These young ones nowadays, they know how to act sweet when they want something." Jonathan frowned, his tired eyes narrowing. "She got my daughter to speak, Mrs. Green. No one else has done that." Mrs. Green's face softened a little. "Yes, but at what cost, sir? You know how fragile Jennifer is. We don't know what she did or what kind of trick she used. You have to be careful. That girl could bring more harm than good." Jonathan didn't reply. He just stared at his coffee cup, the steam fading slowly into the air. Maybe Mrs. Green was right. Maybe he had been too desperate, too ready to believe in anyone who could give him a glimpse of hope. But when he closed his eyes, he heard Jennifer's small voice again, "Daddy," and that memory alone made his chest ache with something close to joy. Later that morning, Anita came down quietly, wearing her plain blue uniform, her hair neatly tied back. She stopped when she saw Jonathan sitting there, unsure if she should speak. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. Jonathan looked up. There was something tired in his eyes, but also something searching. "Sit down, Anita," he said. "We need to talk." Anita nodded, pulling out a chair slowly. The room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. "I need to understand what happened last night," Jonathan began. "How did you get her to speak, to laugh?" Anita looked down at her hands for a moment before answering. "I didn't do anything special, sir. I just stopped trying to fix her. Everyone who came before wanted her to talk again, to act normal. But she wasn't ready. So I just sat with her, even when she didn't speak. I let her know she didn't have to, that she could feel whatever she wanted, and I wouldn't leave." Jonathan listened carefully. Her voice was calm, honest, and warm. "And the music?" he asked quietly. Anita smiled faintly. "It was a song her mother used to sing, wasn't it? I didn't know until I saw her reaction. When she heard it, her eyes changed. She didn't shut down like before. She looked alive. I just followed her lead." Jonathan felt something deep inside him stir. This woman spoke about his daughter like she truly understood her, like she saw the little girl behind the silence. Mrs. Green, who had been pretending to clean near the kitchen counter, finally turned around. "Mr. Foster, may I speak freely?" Jonathan sighed. "Go ahead. I think you're letting emotions cloud your judgment," she said sternly. "This girl has only been here 3 days, and already she's breaking rules, touching the child, playing loud music in the house, bringing memories that might hurt more than heal. That isn't how trauma is handled. You should call her agency and have her replaced before something worse happens." Anita stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "Ma'am, I didn't mean any harm," she said. "I just wanted to help Jennifer feel something again. She's been so lost." Mrs. Green crossed her arms. "Children need order, not pity." Jonathan rose from his chair. His voice was calm but firm. "That's enough, Mrs. Green. Anita stays. For now." Mrs. Green's face stiffened. "Yes, sir," she muttered, turning back toward the counter. Anita's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mr. Foster," she said quietly. He nodded. "Just keep doing what you did yesterday," he said, then paused. "But please, don't surprise me like that again. I wasn't ready." Anita smiled faintly. "Neither was Jennifer." Jonathan looked away, hiding a small, tired smile. It had been a long time since he had seen anyone smile in this house. That afternoon, Anita returned to Jennifer's room. The little girl was sitting by the window, holding her mother's old photo. Anita sat on the floor a few feet away, the same way she always did. "Hi, sweet one," Anita whispered. "It's a beautiful day outside. The sun feels nice. You want to sit by the window with me?" Jennifer didn't answer, but her small eyes followed Anita's hand as she pointed toward the light. Anita opened the small speaker again and played the same soft tune. She began humming quietly. For a moment, Jennifer just stared. Then she put down the photo and crawled closer, sitting beside Anita. "Do you remember the song?" Anita asked softly. Jennifer nodded slightly, a tear sliding down her cheek. "It's okay to cry," Anita said. "Crying helps the pain move out. You don't have to be strong all the time." Jennifer looked at her for a long moment, then leaned gently against Anita's arm. For the first time in months, she allowed someone to hold her. Downstairs, Jonathan was pacing the study, unable to concentrate on work. The image of Anita and Jennifer danced through his mind. He wanted to believe this was a miracle, but a part of him feared losing control again, losing his daughter, losing his peace. Just as he sat down, he heard Mrs. Green's voice from the hallway, sharp and full of worry. "Mr. Foster," she called. "Can I speak with you? It's about Anita." Jonathan looked up, a knot forming in his stomach. "What about her?" Mrs. Green held out a paper she had found near the maid's bag. "I think you need to see this," she said. "This woman isn't who she says she is." Jonathan's face hardened. He took the paper and stared at it. It was an old job application that showed a different story. Anita wasn't just a maid. She had a full teaching degree and a record of a past mistake. His heart dropped. Upstairs, Anita continued to hum softly as Jennifer rested her head against her shoulder, the sound of their quiet laughter floating through the air. Neither of them knew what storm was building downstairs, nor how one old secret was about to change everything again. The sound of Mrs. Green's voice still echoed in Jonathan's ears as he stared at the paper in his hands. His chest tightened. He couldn't believe what he was reading. A teaching degree? A criminal record? None of that had appeared in Anita's file when she was hired. He looked up at Mrs. Green, who stood stiffly near the study door, her expression serious. "I told you something was off," she said, her tone low and certain. "I checked her bag this morning when she left it in the hallway. This was inside. She lied to you, sir. You can't trust people who hide their past." Jonathan sat down heavily in his chair. He rubbed his forehead, trying to calm the storm of thoughts spinning in his mind. "You went through her bag?" he asked quietly. Mrs. Green crossed her arms. "I had to. I've served this family for over 20 years, Mr. Foster. I couldn't stand by while a stranger took control of this house. That woman is hiding something." Jonathan sighed. "That doesn't give you the right to invade her privacy, Mrs. Green." "Maybe not," she replied sharply, "but it gave me the truth." Jonathan stared at the paper again, the words blurring slightly as he read them over and over. He couldn't understand it. Why would Anita hide that she had a teaching degree? Why pretend to be a simple maid when she clearly had more experience than anyone else he had interviewed? And what was this note at the bottom? Check fraud at 19. He stood suddenly, his jaw tight. "Call Anita to my study," he said quietly. "Now." Mrs. Green nodded, satisfaction flickering briefly across her face as she turned to leave. Moments later, Anita appeared at the door. Her hands were clasped in front of her, her face calm but uncertain. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Jonathan didn't answer at first. He just held up the paper. "Do you want to explain this?" Anita froze. Her heart dropped to her stomach. She recognized the document immediately. Mrs. Green must have found it when she moved her things. For a second, she couldn't speak. Jonathan's tone grew firm. "You told me you were a teacher's assistant, not a full teacher. And you didn't mention this," he said, tapping the line about her record. "Why?" Anita swallowed hard. "Because I was afraid, sir," she said softly. "I thought if I told you everything, you wouldn't hire me." "Afraid of what?" Jonathan asked. "That I'd know who you really are?" "No," she said, shaking her head quickly. "Afraid you wouldn't give me a chance." Mrs. Green stood by the door, watching in silence. Anita took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice trembling. It's true. I do have a teaching degree. I graduated 2 years ago, but I couldn't get a job in any school. When I was 19, my little brother got very sick. We didn't have money or insurance. I wrote a bad check to pay for his medicine. I was caught. I paid everything back, and I did community service, but it still went on my record. Schools don't hire teachers with a record, no matter how small. Jonathan's expression softened slightly, but his eyes still held questions. Why didn't you tell me that before? Because I needed this job, she said honestly. Not for me, but for my brother and my grandmother. My grandmother raised us after our parents died, and now she's sick too. I couldn't take care of them with what I was making as a teacher's aide. When I saw your job offer, I thought maybe I could finally help them. But if I told you about my past, you'd never have trusted me with your daughter. Jonathan looked down, his anger slowly mixing with understanding. Mrs. Green stepped forward. You see, sir? She admits it herself. She lied. Anita turned toward her. I didn't lie about the things that matter, she said softly. Everything I said about children and trauma was true. Everything I did for Jennifer was real. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair. He felt torn in two. On one side was the cautious businessman in him, the part that demanded honesty and order. On the other was the father who had just seen his daughter laugh for the first time in months. You should have trusted me, he said quietly. Anita nodded, tears welling in her eyes. You're right, I should have. But please, don't take this out on Jennifer. She's finally smiling again. Don't let my mistake take that away from her. The room was silent for a long time. Jonathan looked at her face, the sincerity, the fear, the exhaustion, and saw something that reminded him of himself after Claire died. A person doing their best just to survive. Before he could speak, a soft voice came from the hallway. Daddy? Jonathan turned sharply. It was Jennifer, standing at the doorway in her pajamas, holding her stuffed bunny close to her chest. Her small face was wet with tears. Daddy, don't send Anita away, she said, her voice trembling but clear. The room went still. Jonathan stared, unable to believe it. She was speaking again. Her lips moved slowly, carefully, but every word was real. Please, Daddy, she makes me feel safe. Jonathan felt his throat tighten. He knelt down in front of his daughter, his vision blurring with tears. You spoke, he whispered. You're really talking. Jennifer nodded, sniffling. Anita helped me. I don't want her to go. Anita stood frozen, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. Mrs. Green's stern face softened as she turned away, blinking fast. Jonathan pulled Jennifer into his arms. I'm not sending her away, he said, his voice breaking. I promise, sweetheart, she's staying. Jennifer smiled weakly and hugged him tighter. For the first time in months, Jonathan felt warmth in his chest that he thought he would never feel again. When he looked up, Anita was still standing there, her eyes full of emotion. Their eyes met, and in that moment, no words were needed. He mouthed quietly, "Thank you." But as he held his daughter close, Jonathan didn't see the shadow of worry cross Mrs. Green's face. The older woman stood by the door, her hands tightening on her apron. She didn't like being wrong, and deep down, she still didn't trust Anita. As Jonathan lifted Jennifer into his arms and carried her upstairs, Anita followed behind silently. Mrs. Green watched them go, her heart full of confusion. She had been with this family for 20 years, and now everything was changing. When the house grew quiet again, she whispered to herself, "This isn't over." Down the hall, Jonathan tucked Jennifer into bed and kissed her forehead. "You did so well today," he whispered. "Mommy would be so proud of you." Jennifer smiled, her small fingers gripping his hand. "Anita told me that Mommy's still watching," she whispered back. Jonathan blinked away tears. Yes, sweetheart. She's watching over both of you. He turned to Anita, who stood quietly near the doorway. Thank you, he said softly, for giving my little girl back her voice. Anita smiled faintly. She always had it, sir. She just needed someone to remind her she could use it again. Jonathan nodded slowly. Emotion caught in his throat. He looked at her and realized how much had changed in just a few days. His home no longer felt as cold as before. But somewhere deep down, he knew peace never lasted long in his world. Something told him that the calm after this moment was only temporary. And soon, he would face a decision that would test everything he believed about trust, forgiveness, and love. The sun rose over the wide Texas fields, painting the sky orange and gold. The Foster mansion glowed softly in the morning light, and for the first time in months, laughter echoed faintly through its halls. Jonathan stood in the doorway of Jennifer's room, watching as Anita helped his daughter brush her hair. Jennifer was humming softly, her small voice sweet and shaky, but alive. It was a sound Jonathan thought he would never hear again. He leaned quietly against the wall, his heart swelling with both pride and guilt. He couldn't stop thinking about the night before, about the look on Anita's face when she thought he would fire her, about his daughter's desperate plea for her to stay. Downstairs, Mrs. Green set the breakfast table in silence. Her face was pale, her movements slow. She had worked for this family for over 2 decades, and she loved Jennifer like her own. But deep down, she couldn't deny what she had seen. Anita had done something none of them could. Still, the thought of trusting her again made Mrs. Green uneasy. As Jonathan came down the stairs, Mrs. Green spoke without turning. "You're quiet this morning, sir." "I'm just thinking," he replied softly, "about everything that's happened." She turned to face him. "And have you decided what to do about her?" Jonathan sighed, his eyes distant. "For now, I'm letting her stay. Jennifer needs her. That's all that matters." Mrs. Green frowned slightly but nodded. "If that's your choice, I'll respect it." Jonathan looked at her carefully. "I know this hasn't been easy for you, Mrs. Green. You've been with us through everything. But I need you to trust me. Anita isn't the enemy." Mrs. Green said nothing. She turned back to the counter, hiding her feelings behind her calm expression. Later that day, Anita asked Jonathan if she could take the afternoon off to visit her grandmother. Jonathan hesitated at first, then offered to drive her himself. "I'd like to meet your family," he said. "You've done a lot for mine." Anita looked surprised. "You don't have to, sir. It's a long drive." "I want to," he said simply. The drive was quiet at first. The long Texas road stretched out before them, the wind whispering through the open window. Anita stared outside, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't know what to say. Jonathan broke the silence. "You were brave last night," he said gently. "You told me the truth when you could have made excuses. That takes strength." Anita smiled faintly. "It wasn't bravery, sir. It was honesty. I've learned that hiding pain doesn't make it go away." Jonathan nodded slowly, his eyes on the road. "That's something I've been trying to learn, too." When they reached her neighborhood, the difference was striking. The mansions and clean lawns of Jonathan's world were replaced by small homes with peeling paint and broken fences. Yet there was warmth here, neighbors greeting each other, children playing on the sidewalk. Anita pointed to a small apartment building. "That's us." Jonathan parked and followed her inside. The stairwell smelled faintly of cooking and old paint. They climbed to the 3rd floor, where an old woman with kind eyes waited by the door. "Grammy," Anita said with a smile. "This is Mr. Foster, my employer." The old woman's smile grew wide. "The billionaire himself, in my home? Mercy, child. You didn't say he was this handsome." Jonathan laughed softly, feeling his cheeks warm. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am." "Call me Ruth," she said, her voice gentle but strong. Any man who makes my grandbaby smile again is welcome here." Jonathan glanced around the small apartment. The furniture was old but clean, the walls filled with family photos. It was a modest home, but it carried love in every corner. A teenage boy stepped out of one of the bedrooms, his eyes shy but curious. "This is my brother, Michael," Anita said. The boy gave a small nod. "Thank you for giving my sister a chance," he said quietly. "She deserves one." Jonathan smiled kindly. "She's done far more for us than we've done for her." Ruth laughed softly. "You should see how that girl glows when she talks about your daughter. I haven't seen her this happy in years." Anita looked down, embarrassed but smiling. "Jennifer's special," she said. "She reminds me why I started working with children in the first place." As they talked, Jonathan's gaze wandered to the ceiling, where water stains spread like dark clouds. He noticed the broken heater by the wall and the worn shoes near the door. His heart tightened. "Your roof leaks," he said quietly. Ruth waved a hand. "Oh, it's been that way for a while. We manage." Jonathan hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "Let me fix it, please." Ruth's smile faded a little. "We don't take charity, Mr. Foster." "It wouldn't be charity," he said. "It would be gratitude. Anita gave my daughter her voice back. That's a debt I can never repay." The old woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "If it makes you feel better, then fine. But you pay her what she's worth, not what she'll accept. That's the real gift." Jonathan smiled. "Deal." When they left the apartment, Anita wiped at her eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." The drive back to the mansion was quiet, filled with a strange calm. For the first time, Jonathan didn't see Anita as just an employee. She was more than that. She was light in a house that had forgotten what warmth felt like. When they arrived home, Mrs. Green was waiting by the door, holding an envelope. Her face was pale, her voice cold. "Mr. Foster, I've made a decision," she said. "I'm resigning. I can't stay in a home where my years of service mean nothing." Jonathan frowned. "Mrs. Green, please." "I've watched that girl change this house, and maybe that's good for you," she said, her voice trembling. "But it's not good for me. I can't watch Jennifer forget who she was before." Before Jonathan could answer, Anita stepped forward and did something no one expected. She hugged Mrs. Green tightly. "I'm sorry," Anita said softly. "I never meant to replace you. Jennifer loves you, Mrs. Green. She needs you." Mrs. Green froze, her hands stiff at her sides. "You don't understand, child," she whispered. "I've cared for that little girl since the day she was born. Now she runs to you instead of me. It hurts." Anita pulled back slightly, her voice gentle. "I do understand. My brother did the same when he got better. But I learned something: when someone starts to heal, it doesn't mean they've forgotten who helped them. It means your love worked." Tears filled Mrs. Green's eyes. She turned away, wiping them quickly. "I only wanted what was best for her," she whispered. "And that's why she still needs you," Anita said softly. "She needs both of us." At that moment, small footsteps came from the stairs. Jennifer stood there, her eyes wide and wet. "Please don't leave, Mrs. Green," she said, her voice trembling. "I love you. I love Anita too. Can't you both stay?" Mrs. Green covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. She knelt and hugged Jennifer tightly. "Oh, my sweet girl," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Jonathan stood quietly, watching the three of them. His eyes glistened as he realized how far they had all come. From that day, everything began to change. Mrs. Green and Anita worked together like family. Jennifer grew stronger each day, laughing, talking, and even drawing again. Months later, Jonathan surprised everyone with another decision. He started a small foundation in Claire's memory, one that helped children heal from trauma, inspired by Anita's way of care. He named it the Light Home Project. At the opening ceremony, Jennifer stood proudly beside him, holding Anita's hand. Cameras flashed, and people whispered in awe, but Jonathan didn't care about that. All he cared about was the sound of his daughter's laughter echoing across the garden. He looked at Anita, his voice soft. "If I had walked away that night, if I hadn't trusted you, I would have lost everything that mattered." Anita smiled. Sometimes, healing begins when we stop being afraid to believe again. Jonathan nodded, his heart full. The mansion that was once silent now sang with life again. And every time he heard Jennifer's laughter, he was reminded of the night he came home early and found his maid dancing with his daughter, a night that changed all their lives forever. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that love and kindness can heal what money and power cannot. When Jonathan came home early, he didn't just catch his maid with his daughter, he found the miracle his heart had been praying for. If this story touched you, tell us what you learned in the comments and where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories that remind us that love is the greatest gift of all. And before you go, answer this: would you have trusted Anita if you were Jonathan?